Steve is going to be sharing today. He hadn't shared it. It's been about a year. So we're gonna let him have at it. He's going to talk to us about the God we just sang about, the God of the universe. So why don't we just all stand and give the man of God a hand and ask God we can receive the word of God. Amen. Give it.
Thank you. You may be seated. Good way to start. I like it. Might have to try that again. When I get finished, we'll do that again, okay? Well, as Deborah said, we're glad you're here. I hope you're glad you're here. And I hope when I get finished and you leave, you'll still be able to say you're glad you were here. I'm Steve Lytle. In case any of you don't know, I'd say this every time, but I don't get to attend every Sunday, so possibly you've been here and seen me and don't know who I am. Doesn't matter, really, but just in case you wanted that information, that's my name. I'm going to talk this morning about, I guess it's a little different subject, going a little different direction from what you'd normally hear. I'm going to talk about outer space. My intro was I was actually going to start with, how does it go on Star Trek? Yeah, space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Lifegate. Except we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay right here. You'll have to go. What's the word? You'll have to use your imagination. Of course, Terry's big on inner space, and there's plenty of that in here. We're going to talk about outer space this morning. But the purpose is simply to put the focus on God for a few minutes because He is so awesome. If you've ever gone out on a cloudless night, it seems like wintertime the atmosphere is cleaner, cooler, clearer. If you've ever gone outside and just looked up at the stars in a place that's dark, really dark, it's amazing. And I can remember doing that, as a young child and middle schooler. We used to go to the planetarium on Brainerd Road up in Chattanooga, and they would do shows. And I just, from that time, I just knew there was a God. So there was never later in life, there was never any problem with knowing that God was real, basically. Progressing from there. Well, the Bible mentions heavens a lot. I didn't take time to count all the verses, but it talks about God being in the heavens, above the heavens. His tabernacle is above the heavens, and all sorts of things. But this morning I'm going to focus on just a couple of verses, and we're going to launch from Psalm 19. That's going to be my first verse. It should be coming up on the screen in just a minute. Psalm 19, verses 1 through 4, it says, "The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanses declaring the work of His hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line," or another reading or acceptable translation, "their voice has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world." So the heavens are telling us about the glory of God. Okay, so what are they telling us? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you. In case you haven't heard, I'm going to tell you some of what the heavens are telling, and you may have some ideas of your own when we get done. I'd like to point out from that verse that the heavens, the word heavens, I didn't include the Hebrew word because I couldn't pronounce it anyway. But it means simply the sky and the area where the celestial bodies move. So it's pretty much everything above the earth. Telling, the word telling is an interesting word in the Hebrew. The root word means to mark as a tally or record, to record, to inscribe, or to enumerate. And they use that by extension to mean to celebrate, to proclaim, or to call out to. So the area where the heavenly bodies move are calling out to the glory of God. They're telling the glory of God. And their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. I want to share some facts with you. There's a whole bunch of them, but I've narrowed it down to 6 facts that I think are important that are going to show, hopefully, the intricate design that God has put into the universe. Because you may know, or if you come across this information at all, there's a large body of scientists who obviously don't believe in God. But there's a large body of scientists who do believe in God. And recently, from about really 1990 on, there have been a lot of exciting discoveries in this area of cosmology. 1990 was a big year. They launched the Hubble telescope. You've probably heard of Hubble. And, the grand idea was to get a telescope above the atmosphere so you'd have a clear view of everything. Well, typical of government production, they launched the telescope in 1990 and got it up there in orbit, opened up the screen, and couldn't see anything. It didn't work. So they had to send astronauts up to correct it, fix the lens, replace the lens in the camera, which they did. It was very successful. And from that time on, Hubble has been shooting pictures all around the universe, and you'll be seeing some behind me on the screen. All these shots that we'll show this morning were taken by Hubble. And some of them are just nice pictures. They don't really relate to what I'm going to say. A couple of them do. But just some of the pictures that I picked out of 25 years worth of picture taking. There's a lot of grand pictures of the universe out there that you can go look up if you like that kind of thing. But again, some of the pictures behind me won't relate to what I'm saying. 2 or 3 of what you'll see will look like explosions. Those are called nebula, and just briefly, a nebula is the leftover gas when a star explodes. Okay, and it makes a tremendously interesting picture. So you'll see some of those up there and a couple other things. Anyway, the facts of the universe have borne out what we know to be true already, that there is a God, and the universe is finely tuned and designed by someone. So the scientists nowadays are pretty much in agreement that yes, the universe is finely tuned and it appears to have been designed. However, I don't think there's a God. So, what do you do with that? And some of them will say, well, religion is outside the realm of science, so we're just not going to talk about it. We'll observe the facts, and this is what we see. So getting started, number one thing I want to present to you, and these facts are, these are parameters that must exist in order for life as we know it to exist, okay? So, maybe somewhere out in the universe there's a little bug crawling around that can exist, can breathe methane and drink acid. We haven't found it. But for life as we know it to exist, then there's a very narrow set of parameters that has to be in place. And some of them are, number one, has to be the right galaxy. Now, the picture behind me is a whirlpool galaxy. It's called the whirlpool galaxy. It's a classification that's called the spiral galaxy. Okay? And for life to exist as we know it, again, the system would have to be located in a spiral galaxy. Of all the galaxies observed so far, only about 5% are spiral galaxies. So that immediately eliminates a lot of possibilities. Why a spiral galaxy? Well, the other ones that are called globular and a couple other names, circular galaxies, they're too dense. And if our system was located anywhere in those galaxies, there'd be too many forces acting on it in order for it to stay functional, for lack of a better word, okay? So it needs to be the right galaxy, and within that spiral, it needs to be, if you can look out one of those arms, either one of those arms, about 2/3 of the way out from the nucleus. Obviously, the nucleus is the bright center, and the stars spiral out, and you're looking at billions upon billions of stars in that one galaxy, and we're looking at billions upon billions of galaxies in the cosmos, in our infinite cosmos. But anyway, the system would need to be in about 2/3 out on the spiral arm, and that arm must be at the right distance from the galaxy center, again, because if we're too close to the center, the whole system is spinning too fast. There's too many gravitational forces acting, and take our solar system, for example, it would just be pulled apart. Okay, so it's got to be the right galaxy. Within the galaxy, it's got to be the right star. Number two, it has to be the right star. Can't be just any old ordinary star. It's got to be a single star system. A double star system, again, will be too many forces, and they have observed many double stars that actually circulate around each other. But if it was a double star system, again, it would pull the planet out of the moderate temperature zone, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But again, the gravitational forces, it's all about gravity, would pull a star out of its temperate zone for life. It needs to be a middle-aged star, which of course ours is, and it needs to have a stable burning phase, which a young star does not have. As a star forms, it pulsates. It basically shrinks and enlarges, and the heat changes and the luminosity changes in a young star as it's basically getting itself together. A middle-aged star has, like a middle-aged person, has kind of settled down from all that sowing its wild oats kind of thing, and sort of knows what's going on, and has what's called a stable burn. But even a middle-aged star, the most stable stars, experience changes in luminosity, either brighter or dimmer. Our own sun the luminosity has increased about 35% since the introduction of life on this planet. Now, normally this would be too much light and heat. It would exterminate all life. But the interesting thing is that the increase in luminosity has been exactly canceled out each step of the way. As the luminosity went up, each step of the way has been canceled out by a decrease in the efficiency of the greenhouse gases that surround the planet. This decrease arose through the careful introduction of just the right species of life at just the right quantities at just the right time. Now, does that sound like an evolutionary coincidence to you? Not to me. The slightest evolutionary accident in any of those steps would have stunted, stopped, or eradicated life altogether. And you and I would not be here this morning doing what we're doing. Okay, so it's got to be the right star. The next one, it's got to be the right planet, obviously. We're not living on Venus, we're not living on Mars. So it has to be the right planet. Now, that picture behind me is a good example of a nova or a nebula, after an explosion. But the right planet must have an environment where water is stable. Water is the basis for all life. Our bodies are 67% water, something like that. That's the basis of all life. This means that it can't be too close or too far from its parent star. It has to be, this is the Goldilocks hypothesis. Can't be too hot, can't be too cold. It's got to be just right, okay? And planet Earth is not too far, it's not too close, it's just right for life. In our case, we're 193 million miles from the sun. It takes 8 minutes for light to get here from the sun. But in our case, a change in distance from the sun of only 2% would mean no you or me, no life. 2% of 193 million, let's see, 0, 02, 2 these are 6, it's about 3.8 million miles. That's not much in planetary terms. So it's got to be in just the right place, and it has to orbit, has to have a stable orbit. Last June, or July, last month, July, the spacecraft went by Pluto and took pictures of Pluto. Another very interesting system. Mankind, after 5,000 years, has now finally observed close up all of the planets. Anyway, Pluto is a very interesting little system. It's a planet, not really a planet. They decided it wasn't a planet anymore. But it has a moon. It's about the same size as a planet, and then 3 little ones. But they circle each other like a binary star. And its orbit, the reason I mention it is because Pluto's orbit at one point goes way, way out, just way out. I mean, further than way out, outside of everything else. But then later it comes back inside the orbit of Uranus, the 8th planet, for about 75 years. And as it travels, it goes, so it's a big elliptical orbit. It's not a stable circular. Well, that would not work for us at all, because when we're way out there, we freeze to death. And then when you get back close to the sun, you know, you get a heck of a tan, but it's hard to live with. So it's got to be the right planet in a stable orbit. The rotational period of that planet has to be just right. Now, of course, this is, if you think about it, it's pretty obvious. It's got to spin in the right amount of time, and obviously we do that. But what's the consequences of spinning too slow? The night times are longer, it gets a whole lot colder, and then when it finally gets to daytime, then it gets too hot. Okay, too hot for life, too cold. That variation would cause a lot of contracting and expansion, and it just, needless to say, it wouldn't work very well for life as we know it. If it's spun faster, then the problem is there's too much movement, air movement. Jupiter, for example, makes one rotation in 10 hours. Earth makes one rotation in 24 hours. The winds on Jupiter on a calm day are about 1,000 miles an hour. Okay? Hurricane Katrina that is on the news right now because it's 10th anniversary, those winds came through at what, 200, 180 miles an hour? Not even, no, 100, it wasn't that high, it was 100 and 130, okay. Well, imagine a 1,000-mile wind. It'd be hard to keep your hat on, that's for sure. So it's got to spin at just the right speed. Pardon me. Moving along, number 5. In order for life to exist as we know it, the planet that we live on has got to have the right companions. I just mentioned Jupiter. And Jupiter plays an extremely important role in our lives. The planet itself is 2.5 times more massive than the other 8 combined. Jupiter is our big brother, and we like Jupiter. It is the 5th planet, I think. Mars is 4, and then Jupiter. But Jupiter's role has been verified and kind of discovered more recently as Jupiter's role kind of stabilizes the whole universe. You got this giant sun with all its gravitational force. So you got to have Jupiter basically to balance things out. Big, massive Jupiter. In the early time of the formation of our solar system, apparently, from all the evidence, Jupiter kind of acted as a vacuum, cleaning out the extra debris that was floating around, coming into the system and taking orbit. And Jupiter kind of, even today, that's Jupiter's job, is to keep the solar system kind of cleaned out. If Jupiter were not there, scientists estimate our planet would be struck 1,000 more times by comet and comet debris than it is now. We haven't had a comet strike since, if you believe scientists, since the days of the dinosaurs. So you're talking a long time. Well, 1,000 more times since then, we'd probably be looking around right now waiting for the next comet to hit. And that would be a bad day. It was a bad day for the dinosaurs. It would be a bad day for us. Jupiter's huge mass and gravity actually pulls comets away from the Earth. It acts as our big brother protector, pulls them away from the Earth. It also deflects comets coming in, deflects them back out in the universe. It also helps to stabilize our orbit, the Earth's orbit, so we're not being pulled to the sun, and get too close. Jupiter keeps us balanced. And Jupiter itself must be within the same narrow parameters. Its orbit has to be a perfect circle, because if it was going out like Pluto does, then we would lose the benefit of its gravitational force and we would be pulled to the sun. And then when it came back in close, obviously the opposite happens. We get pulled toward it. So there would be a constant tug of war, which would have all kinds of consequences for life and for the existence of the planet and the conditions that would be here. So you got to have the right companions. Number 6, this is my last one, because I didn't know how long it would take me to do this, and I didn't want to run long this morning. I was determined not to run long this morning, because the last 2 times I've talked, I ran long. So now I've got to do some ad lib and fill in, because I'm almost to the end of what I want to say, and it's only 10:35, but that's a good thing. Got to have the right companions, and you got to have the right moon. Referring back to Jupiter, I think Jupiter has 12, 15 moons, and another 50 exomoons, or little bitty pieces. Most of the planets have several moons, the bigger ones, but it has to be the right moon. I know we just had a full moon couple of nights ago, and so that was good timing. Moon showed up for my little speech, but our moon is unique in that it's pretty large compared to the size of the planet, and that's a good thing, because it exerts the force that again, it's about gravity, and the force that the moon exerts on the Earth is beneficial. We have tides because of the moon. Because of the tides, the Earth can clean itself, and nutrients are replenished. Nutrients are pulled up out of the floor of the sea there, and they replenish the Earth. And the tides act as a cleansing mechanism, for the ocean. It also stabilizes the tilt of the Earth's axis. Our axis is tilted at 13 degrees or 13.5 degrees, something like that. And if the axis was straight up, again, that would have consequences for our weather. Being tilted at 13 degrees is the Goldilocks scenario. It's just right. It stabilizes our seasons and promotes life. It keeps us from having climactic extremes. And without that stability, again, and these other factors, we would have the extremes that would keep life from flourishing here on the planet. It's believed that, again, in the early times of the planet formation, solar system formation, that the moon, because of its size, was like Jupiter, a little vacuum, and it pulled off many of the harmful gases like methane and whatever else they are. I can't think of the other names that there are, but methane and the other poisonous gases were pulled away from the Earth, leaving, because they're less stable, leaving the stable gases. Our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, hydrogen. Well, as a good example of that is it didn't happen for Venus. It doesn't have a moon. The moon didn't pull off any gases. Venus, is a pressure cooker. Tens of thousands of pounds of pressure, air pressure on the surface, and temperatures that are just 3, 4, 5,000 degrees, which again, there's not any. You'll never meet a Venetian because there aren't any. They can't live in that kind of atmosphere. So again, not to be redundant, but these things have to be this way in order for you and I to be here. Now, the scientists, the atheist or the non-believing agnostic scientists, they look out there and they look at our position in the galaxy, and they look at the size of the Earth. We're just a little bitty thing when you compare us to the rest of the universe. We're in a galaxy that's, no big deal. I mean, it's nice little neighborhood, but it's not one of the most spectacular galaxies out there that you can find. And they see, well, that's just we're nothing special, because look, we're just right here. We're a little solar system, a little tiny solar system. It's kind of like being on the other side of the tracks. These folks on the other side of the tracks don't count. And they see that as just a chance deal. They look at these facts, and they look at our position, and they think they have decided, because God is not part of their equation, not part of their life, that these things must have just come about by chance. Well, in addition to the 6 parameters I just gave you, there are at least another 40 parameters, another 40 conditions that must exist in order for us to exist. Okay? And there's no way that those, let's see, that's 3.5 dozen, let's say, just for round numbers, there's no way that those 40 conditions, sets of conditions, in my mind, could just happen. And I think any reasonable person who has not educated himself into being a fool would agree that there's no way that could have just happened. There's no one in the scientific community nowadays that disagrees with the fact that the universe is obviously shows design features. All scientists now agree, yes, there's a design element to the universe. It's really quite remarkable. However, that doesn't mean there's a God. What? That doesn't mean there's a God, because in their mind, if you take an infinite amount of matter, an infinite amount of space, and space is infinite, and by the way, since I've got time to chase a rabbit, scientists have used the Hubble to peer, as far as they can. They look as far as they can look. It's like, how far can you see? Well, they believe now that they have seen and recorded galaxies that are 13.5 or 13.7 billion light years away. That's a long way away. Because light travels 186,000 miles in a second. It's faster than Delbert drives on the freeway. And so a light year is a distance that light can travel at that speed, which is an ungodly number. And then you're talking about 13 billion of those light years. You're talking about a long way. So I've completely lost where I was going with this. Anyway, they're looking out into the deep universe, and they're seeing these. Yeah, that's what it was. They're seeing this great distance. They're looking into, as far as I'm concerned, they're looking at the face of God, but they're looking into infinity. And they say, with an infinite amount of space and an infinite amount of matter and an infinite amount of chances, an infinite amount of time, 13 billion years is a long time, that this matter will finally find its way into collisions and create what we have today. And it's all chance. It all came about by chance. So, again, to the reasonable man, wham, wham, beat your head on the table. You what? That's like me going out in the parking lot, and there's a Corvette sitting out there. And I walk out and I say, wow, look at what has fallen together in this parking lot. The guy comes out and he says, no, this was built by, General Motors up in... No way. That all came about by chance. If I took everything that goes in, if I took the rubber and steel and I threw it up enough times, it's going to fall down and land together as a car, as a Corvette. Not just a car, but a Corvette. As you know, the Bible talks about people who have become so wise that they've become fools. And I believe that's the case. Don't want to call names, but in our scientific community, I see that a lot. And the Apostle Paul speaks to that in Romans 1. Let me read that for you just right quick. Romans 1 and verse 20. I'm kind of coming in on the middle of a sentence here. But Paul says in Romans 1:20, "For since the creation of this world," Paul was a creationist, by the way, not a evolutionist. "For since the creation of this world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen." From the beginning, they have been clearly seen, "being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse." So these guys are without excuse. Now, I do say there's a growing number of scientists who are at least willing to talk about the possibility of a God because they're looking at this set of facts and more. But we're all without excuse, right? There is a God. We're all without excuse. And if you want to, go out on a clear night in a dark space and look up. And just spend about 5 minutes. You'll see more stars than you can count in a lifetime. And you'll see more infinite space than you can wrap your mind around. Okay? All created and has been there since the beginning. So we're without excuse. So the heavens are telling the glory of God. And you needed me today to tell you what the heavens were telling us, because the verse said that their voice goes out to the ends of the earth and covers the whole earth. But it's, unless you think about it, it's hard to know what they're saying. So you needed me to tell you what they were saying this morning. And I've made a list of some of the things the heavens are saying, and possibly you have thought of some of your own while I've been talking this morning. But in no particular order, some of what the heavens are telling us is about God's glory and His majesty. Some of the pictures you've seen, I think you would agree, were glorious and majestic. The God of glory, God is glorious. He is majestic, above and beyond anything really we can imagine. But in my mind, the universe gives us a good starting point, a good picture. The heavens are telling us about His creative power. Again, you're looking into infinity when you look up at the night sky. All these billions of stars in these billions of galaxies in this infinite space, black space. And by the way, since I've got a minute, the new thing in science, or the current thing in science, this might interest you. Again, go outside and look up at all the stars on a moonless night in a dark place. What do you really mostly see? You see a lot of pinpoints of light, right? But what do you mostly see? Nothing. Darkness, right? Dark. Well, how come, I'm looking at multiplied billions of stars, how come it's not daylight bright out there at night? Why is there a night? Well, because God created it. He said, "Let there be light." He separated the light from the dark. But why, when I go out and look at billions and billions upon billions of stars, is it mostly dark? Well, that's the current trend in science today, in cosmology, is why is it dark? Years ago, Albert Einstein, the great Albert Einstein, proposed that there was a thing called dark matter and dark energy. Since they launched Hubble, they have confirmed that the entire universe is still expanding. We knew it was expanding, but the old theory was that it would expand to a point and then it would shrink back on itself, re-explode, and start expanding again. And it would go in this constant, but we wouldn't live to see it. I wasn't there when it exploded. I won't be there when it dies. But it would go back and forth in this life-death cycle. But what they have found out now and confirmed is that the universe is actually expanding faster now than it was 1,000 years ago. So the question is, why? What's going on here? So the current pursuit of knowledge is to explain why it's expanding faster than we thought it was, or than it should be. The explanation is dark matter, but we don't know what dark matter is, or dark energy. So the heavens are telling us that God has still got some secrets. There's a verse in Deuteronomy that says there are some things that God does not reveal. The secrets of God are beyond finding out, I think is how it goes. I didn't look that up to be accurate on that, but in the Lytle paraphrase, it says, the secrets of God are beyond finding out. If He wants to keep it secret, you're not going to find out what the deal is. But we're still in an age of discovery, and we're learning things all the time. And I'm only talking about one area of life, the cosmos. What about the body? What about the oceans? They discover new species in the oceans every now and then. They found new animals over in Indonesia, in the jungles. They find a new animal they didn't know existed. And so God has still got some secrets, and the heavens are telling us that God has still got some secrets, some things left for us to discover. And any subject that you want to pursue, if you will pursue it in light of God's knowledge or God's help, you start uncovering layer after layer of stuff that you didn't know was there. And this is the macro universe. What about the micro? We've got all kinds of little particles that make up. Another place Paul said that Jesus is what holds everything together, and actually holds creation together. And we've learned, that there's these little things called atoms, and these little, which are way too small to see, so we have to do other things to observe them. But these little atoms are made up of little pieces called protons, neutrons, and electrons. All you science students, I know you remember that. But it gets smaller. Nowadays we've got quarks, neutrinos, and if you read the paper, you may have seen, I think it's been a couple of years ago, they discovered this little particle they called the God particle, the Higgs boson particle, which they believe is the foundational particle of the entire universe. They've only observed a couple of them. So the deeper you go, God still has secrets for us to discover. The heavens are telling us about His creative detail in everything that you look at. That's what I was just talking about. It's His details. His limitless creativity. We're looking at an infinite universe. The heavens are also telling us, and this is a little more important maybe, about His presence and availability, I think. Again, going back to my younger years, which I can barely remember, I'd look up at the sky. I knew there was a God. There was just no doubt. Again, a reasonable person, I think, would look at this and say, there has to be a God. This just could not just happen. It speaks to us. The heavens are telling us about God's eternalness. Scientists are trying to look back in time, and they think they've looked back 13-point-something billion years. And by the way, if it's an infinite universe and we're looking in this direction, what's on the other side of how far we can see? If I can see to the edge of this desk in an infinite system, what's on the other side? Well, in this room you are. But if I was extremely narrow-sighted, I couldn't see you. I would think the end of this desk was the end of my universe. But it's not, is it? An infinite system. So if it's an infinite system, it's been here how long? See, time is just something that man has created. God is outside of time. He's beyond time. He's before time. He's after time. He's outside of time. In God's cosmology, everything that's going on is just a process. It's not 13 billion years to an eternal being. How would you measure time? Well, this is what he's doing now. This is what he did then, so on and so forth. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, it speaks to us of his eternalism. Now, the point of all this, and I do have a point. I have one point, really only one point. But the point of all this, that if there is a God that created all of this, and again, this is just one subject matter. If there's a God that created all of this, don't you think he can handle your problems? Don't you think he can speak to what your needs are? Healing a body, working out a relationship, working out a career, whatever. God is available. The God of wonder beyond our galaxy is also the God of wonder who's right in the middle of all your stuff, if you want him to be. Amen. So there is a God. And the even better part is, not only is there a God, he proved himself by coming to earth as a man. We call him Jesus Christ. Jesus was there at creation. If you read Genesis 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. And God said, let there be light. And there was a big explosion, and there was light. And God separated the light from the dark. And then in John 1, the Gospel of John 1, you read, Jesus is the beginning. He is the beginning. So God, the awesome God that we're worshiping this morning, is available to help you with your needs. And so what we're going to do right now is go to ministry. So those of you who are prayers, for lack of a better word, come on up. Praise team, come on up. We're gonna wrap this up. And if you have a need this morning, well, you know it would be good too if you had a testimony. If something good, really good happened to you, and you want to tell one of these folks, you know, we need to. My point this morning was in praise of our awesome God. We have an awesome God. We should be praising him all the time. So maybe something good happened to you. You come up and tell Uncle Joe there something good that happened to you this week. Praise God. Tell somebody. If it's not Joe, tell somebody how awesome God has been this week. If you have a need, come forward, and these folks will pray with you. And my thanks for your attention. We'll do it again next year.